Folks, as many of you know, I get less than 24 hours notice on who I'm going to be interviewing for this show. I don't book these people. And yesterday afternoon, I was informed I was going to be interviewing Rudy Giuliani this morning, which I did. And folks, I'm just going to say it is one of the most interesting, explosive interviews I've probably ever done. And yes, we do talk about 9/11. And yes, we do talk about Building 7 in particular. I think this is the first time he's ever gone on the record about it. We talk Biden and beyond. So here it is, my interview with Rudy Giuliani. And we are back. We are joined by somebody who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. He is the former mayor of New York City, host of Saturday Night Live, and an integral member of Team Trump. The Biden Crime Family, the blueprint for their prosecution, is the book. We are now with Rudy Giuliani. Thank you so much for coming in. And, first question, first of all, why did you write the book? And how far are we talking when we're talking about the Biden crime family? Because, here's somebody that I was following long before he was vice president. I could talk about some of those crimes. How far back does this book actually go?
Well, it goes back in detail to the crimes he committed as vice president. But it goes back in general to the crimes he committed from the first day he became a senator. I mean, the man was a petty little criminal when he first became a senator, using his brothers as bagmen. They called themselves influencers or whatever, but they were basically bringing big money, small money deals to him, and he was cashing in from the day he became a senator. Virtually admitted it when he said, if he hadn't raised so much money when he ran for Senate when he was 29, he would have been corrupt. He actually said that. And then, of course, there was the big deal for his son with a no-show bank at the MSNBA bank for 9 years. And Joe Biden became the only Democratic senator to vote for banks and got the nickname Mr. MSNBA Bank. Everybody knew he was a crook. And then when he ran for the president in 87 and 88, they drove him out. And the liberal reporters proclaimed, thank God we got rid of him early because he's a pathological liar. And this guy emerges as a presidential candidate, and now he's into big deals, $1 million deals. A piece of the $2.5 billion housing deal in Iraq to sell us out to Iraq. His brother James got that. At least $8 billion in Ukraine from the crookedest oligarch in Ukraine who was Russian-oriented. Could be as much as $20 million. But the FBI never went to look at the offshore bank accounts, which this points out. The woman is still there, by the way, willing to do it. Then, of course, the $3.5 billion from one of the people closest to Putin in Russia for a real estate deal that probably netted more like $20 million. And then $21 million from China, all during the time he's vice president, leading up to running for president. His son is in business with the top spy in China, with total access to all of those top secret documents that he stole, including ones about China. Now, the press and the government has never inquired into any of this. Much of this could have been prosecuted before he was president. I gave it to the State Department long before that. The Justice Department had it all in December and January of 2020. He could have been prosecuted before he announced for the presidency. And it would have been a very, very strong RICO case.
Let me just stop you there, because isn't that one of the main issues? And I want to go back through some of those crimes that you actually talked about, because you went back as far as Iraq, and this is a guy that said that he wrote the Patriot Act, basically pre 9/11, and was much behind that as well. But when you're talking about the prosecution, this is a guy that literally was put in there, installed, in my opinion, as a dementia patient. There was no question when you watch those debates that when he was saying things like 300 Joe, when he was talking about records and baby players, he was well on the way. And
Oh, yeah.
it's only now, what? It took the press 3+ years to admit that, even when confronted by others with that very reality. And when you talk about some of these crimes that have been committed, our own Department of Injustice doesn't say that he didn't commit them. It says that, listen, he couldn't mentally competently stand against these crimes. So after the fact, no matter what happens in this election, isn't he and his co-conspirators, aren't they essentially protected, unfortunately?
Well, they're not really. I mean, he's gonna have to prove that he was mentally incompetent. He can't. It isn't just I forget here and there. I forget sometimes. He has to be virtually unable to participate in his own defense. So we'll have to prove that he's a vegetable. Meanwhile, the others aren't free. His son isn't free. His brothers aren't free. Blinken isn't free from the cover-up of the hard drive, which was probably the worst election fraud in American history. Remember when myself and Bob Costello obtained the hard drive and put it out and gave it to the Post. The FBI and Bill Barr had known for 10 months that the hard drive was valid.
But again, that's to my point.
They covered it up.
Well,
Shouldn't
again,
they be prosecuted for that?
But again, Rudy, isn't that to my point that you literally had the guy on the inside that's part of the administration that had this thing for almost a year, and then he goes along with the Russia story and doesn't even comment on the thing. While
Yes,
all
of
these
course.
intelligence agents come out in unison as it's being censored. So, look, I'll put it to this way. I'm 45 years young. I have not seen any executive pay any real price, maybe since Iran-Contra, where there were a lot of slaps on the wrist, in my opinion, and somebody like Ollie North, who they made the face of it, got book deals and TV shows. That's really not the way
Absolutely.
to discourage it. And then I would go Scooter Libby. He took the brunt for Enron, but that's the last guy, and he was pardoned by Trump, right? So when we're talking about the executive, hasn't it gotten, and I would call it an executive within an executive, haven't we gone off the rails? How do we actually start getting levels of accountability?
Well, we've become a country that is in the bottom half of countries for justice. We're no longer a country. We pretend to have justice. Look, they're trying to put me and Donald Trump in jail for the rest of our natural lives. Meanwhile, Barack Obama gave billions of dollars in cash under the table to the biggest terrorist in the world, the Ayatollah. That's money laundering. President, no president. That's not an official act of the president to give cash to a terrorist. Why hasn't Obama been prosecuted 5 years ago? Because he's in the golden circle. Clinton. I mean, the Clintons smashed up 33,000 emails. They took money from everyone for that foundation and used it as a cash pile. And they haven't been prosecuted, but they're in the Biden. The proof against Biden is overwhelming. There's a tape recording in which he admits knowing all about his son's foreign dealings. You've never heard that. Even the conservative press covers it up. They cover up the email that would just blast him right out of the water. Hunter Biden emails his daughter a summary of the RICO case. For 30 years, I gave half of my income to Pop. Why would a son give half his income to Pop if he wasn't working for Pop? And what was Pop's job? Senator and vice president. And what were they selling? Ice cream? They were selling Joe. Selling us out in Iraq so that we got people killed as a result of what he did, not getting a status of forces agreement. Selling us out in Ukraine, where we ended up being as corrupt as they were, if not more corrupt. How the hell are we going to fix them if we're corrupt? Selling us out to China in a form where they should be prosecuted for treason. Biden gave up the Bagram Air Base, 400 miles from China, 400 miles from Iran, and 500 miles from Russia. Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind, Biden? It was one of our best air bases in the world. Trump and nobody else had any intention of giving up. His cowardly generals, who also are traitors like Milley, protested against it, but they never spoke out about it to protect us, the American people. Do you know who's taken over that airbase 400 miles from China? The country that gave him $21 million, China. You want me to believe, as the most successful prosecutor of the 20th century, that wasn't a connection? That's not a quid pro quo? There's no president in half his right mind that would give up that airbase. 400 miles from China, we gave up an airbase with $85 billion worth of equipment. That equipment is now being used to kill Israelis.
So you mentioned earlier on kind of his involvement in profiteering from the Iraq War. Now, really the way that Biden came onto my radar is he was one of the people that met with a guy named General Mahmoud Ahmed of the Pakistani ISI shortly after 9/11. Now, he met with a lot of people, but Joe Biden went on TV and bragged about this encounter. This guy ends up being a guy who wired $100,000 to Atta through Omar Saeed Sheikh the week before the attacks. We got him on the record twice while he was running for president in 2008 in the primary debates. At first, he admitted to the meeting and then said, I told him if he didn't stop funding the Taliban, we were going to take him out next. Yet really, Pakistan was never on the table in the war on terror. And then the second time that he was confronted about this, he said it was classified. Two-part question. What do you think about that? And Trump has alluded to not only the JFK files, which he's talked about in length, but possibly declassifying the 9/11 files. It's 20 plus years later. Shouldn't that happen?
100%. The Kennedy files, the 9/11 files, and all the files of Biden's connections with the president of Ukraine during the time his son and the company were cut off and the case was fixed. There are about 7 hours of tapes at the time that Poroshenko dismisses the prosecutor and quashes the case against Burisma and his son. Those tapes are being withheld by the State Department. Now, I've heard part of them. In one of them, he approves the new prosecutor. Not only does Biden get the old prosecutor fired, the president of Ukraine feels it necessary to go to Biden and get approval for Lutsenko, the new prosecutor. Now, when does a vice president get to approve a prosecutor in a foreign country who's prosecuting his son? It also makes clear that Poroshenko himself got massive bribes, which means Zelensky, the little guy we're giving $160 billion to, is completely involved in the corruption of the second most corrupt nation in the world. Zelensky knows the whole deal. His mentor was the chief money launderer for 15 years. His mentor could tell you, probably has it memorized, the Joe Biden offshore bank accounts. And that would open up, I am told by the Ukrainians, maybe another 14, 15 million that they got. And finally, there's a woman who was the chief auditor for Burisma, who was wanted to testify for 4 years that the FBI has never interviewed, actually put her at risk of being killed. She had to go run. And we have the FBI investigating the Trump assassination attempts, and they've tried to frame him twice.
Well, let me just stop you just for a second.
We're going to believe their investigation?
I do want to get into the assassination attempts if that's something you'd like to talk about. But before, I think we should also make the point that, you talk about Burisma, talk about Poroshenko. As somebody who reported on Biden sitting there with Richard Haas of the CFR and joking about $1 billion and withholding it unless the prosecutor who was looking at his son's case was fired on the spot. Not only did I not believe, first of all, I didn't think that any prosecution was going to come out of that. That's not how the world works. But I certainly didn't think it would be the anchor point for the second Trump impeachment, which it essentially was, because Trump asks, obviously, for them to look into this case. And you got this guy saying, well, son of a bitch, and doing it. I mean, seriously, and then Trump is the one under criminal investigation for a phone call anybody can listen to that's not corrupt in the slightest. And you've got somebody, I used to call him before he was Dementia Joe, Joey B. gangster style, talking about withholding $1 billion and nothing's done to the guy. I mean, doesn't that speak to where we are as a country? That video is from 2017, I think.
Yeah, well, that video is a complete confession to the crime of bribery under common law. When I heard it the first time, I asked him to play it a second time. And I sat down with a little piece of paper and I outlined the diagram of the crime of bribery. And I showed them how it fits every element. Here, it's real simple. Bribery is offering something of value to a public official in exchange for their official action. He offered him $7 billion. He asked him to get rid of the prosecutor. Money, official action, crime of bribery completed. Now you need a motive. Well, he left out of it the biggest thing of all. His son was a defendant, and the guy who paid him $5 million was the chief defendant and the richest guy in Ukraine. Now, all of a sudden, 6 months later, the case disappears for no reason. I have prosecuted, I don't know how many cases, never lost one. And this would have been the easiest case I ever prosecuted. It had all the elements. And then when I got the hard drive, I'd have been a disc jockey, not even a prosecutor. I just play the tapes, play the emails.
Listen, you've mentioned the hard drive a couple times, right? And listen, to some extent, that got into the public arena. Plenty of citizen investigators were able to get those files. A lot of stuff out there. You know, we talk about that laptop, but then when you also talk about corruption, you know, you mentioned, I think, the Hillary emails earlier on. I had Nate Kane, who's the whistleblower behind that, on here. And one of the conversations we had was about another laptop. And this is the Weiner laptop that the NYPD got.
Oh, my God, yeah.
And that's something that we've never seen anything from. He said that his supervisor had sent a forensic FBI laptop to go investigate that because the FBI did stuff in there. Not only the laptop they were using to investigate disappeared, and his supervisor got in trouble. Again, I'd never heard that story, but he put it out there. Weiner later gets prosecuted for an inappropriate online relationship with a 15-year-old girl. None of that data came from his laptop. It was the girl who had archived it. He did some time in a country club prison, but to this day, we not only don't know about Weiner's crimes on that laptop, but as you know, he was married to Huma Abedin at the time. She had access to that laptop. It's been alluded to that all of her communications with Hillary Clinton and others within the administration are there. So again, speaking to that corruption, that's a laptop that supposedly has been in the hands of not only the NYPD, but the DOJ, aka the FBI, for a decade. Will we ever find out anything about the crimes on that laptop, Rudy?
Well, I do hope that Donald Trump releases everything that still exists. I have no doubt they've destroyed some evidence. Look, in Georgia, they burned 320,000 ballots. It was revealed 2 months ago. Nobody reported it. I have no doubt those are the 320,000 ballots that were done by a machine after the election to steal the election. I have no doubt about it. I've got informants that could probably prove it. But they burned it. I mean, they've done a lot of that. So, yeah, but there will be evidence available. If somebody wants to put this together, let's be honest, they could put together about 70% of it. You'd always miss about 30% because there's some stuff they really got rid of. The simple fact is there's a golden circle in America. It's made up of mostly, if not all, Democrats. Not all Democrats. Most Democrats are out of it. The privileged, crooked ones. And we have the most crooked government we've ever had in the history of this country. It started with Clinton, it escalated under Obama, and it became world-class under Biden. And now it's on its way to communism. One world. The UN passed a resolution. Nobody paid much attention to it 2 weeks ago.
Some of the future. I know what it was.
Government.
Some of the future.
For a one-world government. This is what Obama wants. This is what Soros wants. That's what he's paying for. This is what Gates is paying for. Biden doesn't know what he wants. Kamala's too stupid to realize it.
Well, all right, let me stop you. Who's running the country? Rudy, because that's the thing. Obviously, Biden's not running it. Kamala Harris, I mean, give me a break, and that's why most people...
She's too stupid.
Yeah, she's not running it. Listen, I'll say this. I think there have been varying degrees of, George W. Bush probably not running everything. Competent vipers underneath him. Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Rove. They knew what they were doing, right? You mentioned,
they were Americans.
Well, I think that Milley, et cetera, they're not there. So who do you think is running the government? And by the way, you mentioned the assassination attempts. Well, what's your viewpoint on them?
Well, my viewpoint on them is I have to take the worst case scenario as a prosecutor. So I always prosecuted murders. Starts this way. Who has the biggest motive? Who's number two? Who's number three? Who's number four? One of the best homicide detectives in the world taught me that. I think I solved every homicide I looked at. Well, who has the biggest motive? Well, Kamala, the Democratic National Committee, the deep state, Soros, Biden before he went boxo. We're not investigating them, are we? So
I don't know. We're investigating anything on it. They told us in a public forum.
Ukraine?
Hold on, Rudy. They told us in a public forum. Ray said that all 8 shots were by crooks when we have the name of the police officer and National Guardsman that says that he engaged crooks and hit him. So that second volley is local police officers. Obviously, the kill shot comes from the sniper 5 to 6 seconds after Trump is on the ground, caving his skull out. He's already been incapacitated. And we've even got a director of the FBI that's saying that Trump, we don't even know if he was shot. Of course he was shot. It's on camera. There's a picture of the bullet whizzing by his head on top of it, and they're questioning that. That's how far, we're living in the post-truth world in a lot of ways, are we not?
We are, sir. Absolutely. No question about it. But the main suspects should be the top presidential candidate, like Lyndon Johnson, had plenty of motive to kill John Kennedy. The deep state, in much the same way the mafia had one to kill Kennedy. And then he was in Ukraine beforehand. Ukraine, the gravy train's over the minute Trump gets in. And there's a file there that's devastating. I know it. I've seen some of it. And Zelensky, don't get fooled by that little guy. Zelensky is the product of one of the crookedest men in the world. The guy who was the chief money launderer, Kolomoisky, who owned Bank Privat. He made Zelensky a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire. So you think Zelensky is going to reveal that? He's sitting on $100 million bribe to the prior president that he's hiding. So when these guys whack up money, Zelensky and Biden, all Zelensky has to say to Biden is, I got all the pictures Giuliani doesn't have. And Joe gets a little scared and gives him another $8 billion. Okay. We're getting ripped off in Ukraine. And then what about China? He got bribed to give up the Bagram Air Base. There's no other explanation for it. Otherwise, he was completely out of his mind. You got to be crazy to give up the air
you
base
could go both ways.
I'm
I'm sure there were some kickbacks, but they're not mutually exclusive. I think he is kind of out of his mind. Mr. Giuliani, I want to be respectful of your time. Now, this is going to be the toughest question of the day, but I can't help but ask it. Earlier you said, let's declassify the 9/11 files. Now, I don't know that you've ever made a comment on Building 7, but your city corporation counsel at the time, Michael Hess, was actually in that with Barry Jennings trying to get out, witnessed an explosion, and was later rescued by the fire department before that building came down. I would love to get your comments, sir, on Building 7 and what you know about that.
Well, what I know about it is it was the building in which the Emergency Management Center was put there because the Secret Service was located there, the Defense Department, and the FBI. So we need an emergency management center, and we need to bring those people into an emergency. And they ruled it safe enough. We had a backup center. We have 2 backup centers. So it was a critical decision, but not an exclusively critical decision. I knew if that went down in 5 minutes, I had another center at the police department, another center Midtown, and one in Brooklyn. We were the best prepared for an emergency of any city in America. So look, it was tragic that it went down, but we just about lost no one in that building, thank God. The CIA lost a lot of sensitive information. They believe we retrieved about 80% of it. So it turned out to be the wrong place to put it, but also intelligently, there were 4 backups. So within 8 minutes, we were able to secure the city. Mike Hess would tell you that when he got out, he and the other gentleman were the last 2 people out of the building. And then it came down about 4 hours later. So better if it didn't, but it didn't cause the kind of damage that some of the others did.
Rudy Giuliani, let everybody know how they can get your book, sir.
Oh, you just go to Amazon. You can get it. It's pre-ordered. It can come out next week. It is an excellent primer on how a criminal trial is done in a RICO trial. I also did it because there should be a lot of RICO trials now. RICO allows you to take the money from them. That's the key to crushing the mob, crushing the Teamsters, crushing Las Vegas, which is what I did all that. We didn't just do it by putting them in jail. We took their money away. We took billions of dollars away from them. I took $1 billion from Milken and Boesky to crush what they were doing. So that's what we should do. And we can get this money back from the Biden family, even after he's dead. I mean, they sold our country out for every day he was in public service. They were looking for money. That's all they were about. He has become somewhat demented now, almost foolishly demented. But the thing that's amazing is the person running for president covered that all up. Kamala Harris may be stupid.
Listen, they still have this guy as the president. We're on the brink of World War III. He clearly isn't running anything. She's on The View saying she wouldn't change a thing throughout the administration. Again, we're in a very bizarre spot. It seems very clear to me. I travel the country. I know that you do too. Doesn't seem like a close election. I was just in North Carolina, a swing state.
To me either.
Doesn't seem.
That, having gone through, having been his lawyer in the election fraud of 2020, I know what they can do. And I know how the press has made it unbelievable that they could do it. But it is absolutely true. There are people who actually believe you're insane or a traitor if you believe that the election of 2020 was stolen. I believe you're absolutely stupid if you don't realize it. And I can prove it, that you're stupid. I can show you how much he won Georgia by.
Yes. Well, we are certainly in agreement there, sir. Been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy.
Great interview, by the way.
Thank you, sir.